Hello. Today is the best books of 2021. These are the top 10 with an asterisk books that I read in 2021. Obviously, when we get into this list, you will realize that not all of them came out in 2021, but nonetheless, I read them in 2021. So I'm very excited. Now, what I did last year and what I'm gonna do again this year is I'm gonna talk more about how these 10 books fit into the overall landscape of what I read this year and why they are ranked where they are on the list, more so than about the individual books. If you want to hear more about the individual books, I mean, I'll tell you a little bit, but if you want to get a bigger sense of why I like them so much, you can go and check out the corresponding genre list best of that I've already put out at this point. So you can get more information there. Like if you see a mystery on this list that you're intrigued about, go watch the mystery list. But I'm gonna start by talking about stats and how these top 10 books compare to last year in terms of some of the metrics that I started measuring, as well as how they compare to the overall group of books that I read this year. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll just go ahead and get into it, and hopefully it will all come together from there. So the books that qualified to make this list had to be 4.5 or 5 stars, and a 4.5 star for me is a best book of the year. A 5 star is an all-time best book. Last year, I had 19 4.5 star books and 6 5-star books, which comprised 5.9% and 1.86% of my reading, respectively. But this year, I'm gonna tell you, I had fewer 4.5 and 5-star books. We'll get more into this in my full reading stat wrap up when the calendar year of 2021 has ended. But basically, what I've noticed is that I had a lot more 4 stars this year, but I didn't have as many 4.5 and 5 stars. So I read a lot of things that I was really enjoying, but not some of my faves of the year or all-time faves. There was less kind of highs, but also fewer lows. That was sort of the overall vibe this year. So this year I had 11 4.5 star books and 5 5-star books, which comprised 4.26 and 1.94% of my reading, respectively. So basically in 2020, 4.5 and 5 stars made up 7.76% of my reading, but this year it was only 6.2% of my reading for the year. So in terms of the 4.5 star books that did not make this list, there's really only 5 I have to talk about. And those are The Villa by Nora Roberts, 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Humph, Dress Codes by Richard Thompson Ford, Every Last Fear by Alex Finlay, and Savage Appetites by Rachel Monroe. So most of the things that were top tier for me get to be reflected in this best of the year list. So that's kind of just an interesting change from last year. Then in terms of the stats that I started monitoring or calculating last year, for my top books, I did not trend as well on these as I did last year, which really surprised me because, again, spoiler to my overall stats list for 2020, but I actually exceeded my goal of reading 50% books that are meaningfully not like me. So either the author or the main character is not alive, not a woman, not white, LGBTQIA+, is not American, or is differently abled or has some kind of health diversity aspect to their identity. So if you look year over year, the only category I did better in this year for my top 10 were authors that were alive. So I wouldn't say that they're wildly different, but most of them are at least 10% different, trending negatively. And that surprised me because I had more books to choose from, so you would think it would be equal or more. So I went and I pulled my 4-star stats for the same criteria, and actually I did trend better in my 4-star pool. So basically what I'm hearing is that most books I read had more elements that were not like me, and I did like most of them, but the top tier, not as much. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I always talk about tracking some of this stuff is helpful, I think, to just have awareness of your own biases or just getting a pulse on the kinds of things that you're reading and enjoying. So yeah, anyway, this is the second year that I've tracked this stuff, so I will be interested to see. We don't have a real pattern yet, so I'm hoping in the next couple of years a real pattern will start to emerge that we can comment on together. In terms of genre breakdown on this top 10 list, we have 3 mystery thrillers, 1 fantasy, but with an asterisk, because really there's 2 in that slot, preview of coming attractions, 2 romances, 1 classic, and the rest is nonfiction of some kind. So that makes sense because nonfiction and mystery were definitely my 2 best genre reading this year. So it makes sense that they are the highest represented on this chart. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the ranking, shall we? Number 11, but is being treated as number 10, is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. And the reason that I decided to make this the one that kind of slotted in at the very bottom, because technically it wasn't on the original list, but because I put two together, we got to elevate one up onto this list. The reason I picked this is because this is a debut. I think for a debut, the writing itself in this is exceptional. And I don't think you would know this was a debut reading it. This feels like a very confident book. This is a very well paced, and the prose itself is very well written. Characters are well developed, and overall I just think thematically this packs such a punch. So I guess in that respect, like, I can see that this potentially is a story the author has been like saving up and really wanted to tell, but just the competency of the craftsmanship in this I think is really, really impressive as a debut. So I felt like it deserved to make the top 10 based on that element of it. Number 9/10 is Do Nothing: How to Break Away from Overworking, Overdoing, and Underliving by Celeste Headlee. And I wanted this to be in the top 10 because I really appreciate that this did a good job of, before it gave you practical advice, which I do think that this is a book that has an interest in giving actual tips or giving you something practicable to take away from the book. Before it did that, it rooted all of its advice in its historical and sociological context around work, particularly with a lens here in the US, though I'm sure that there is applicability outside of the US as well. And I just appreciated that. I like that as a project. I wish more how-to books would do some of that, because I think often the advice they end up giving ends up being quite tone deaf in terms of certain assumptions it's making about readers' lives. So I appreciated that this took the time to do that, and it made me realize I wish all nonfiction would do that. So that's why it made the top 10. Number 8/9 is The Love Con by Saricia Glass. And the reason I wanted this one to be in the top 10 was because it is a great example of a book that just met me in my moment. I was reading this right before a surgery I was having that I was really anxious about, and it just provided the perfect level of escapism and wholesomeness and loveliness. And that is something that I really go to romance for. That's something I really appreciate romances doing, which is just being able to give you happy ending that you want. I mean, happy ending in more than one ways often, but you know, in terms of the conclusion of the plot, it always delivers sort of just that good feeling. And this just really hit the spot for the kind of book I needed in the moment. So aside from just enjoying it as a book, I just appreciated that it gave me that feeling when I needed it. Number 8/7 is Fearing the Black Body: The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings. And I picked this because this has really been very I read this towards the beginning of the year, and it has really driven a lot of what I've been thinking about for the whole of 2021. I have a couple of videos coming out that are gonna include information from this or have influenced me thinking more about this, but I just really appreciated that this is the kind of book that gives the historical rooting in something that I experience in my own life, which is people being fat phobic against me, or me having essentially internalized fat phobia, giving historical context as to why that is. So I love historical nonfiction this is very academic, like this is not necessarily nonfiction written for the masses, quote unquote. It really still was very personal to me. And I think well-written nonfiction can still do that, even if it's not necessarily the most readable thing ever. This really impacted me personally. So I just appreciated that. And also I really admire the skill with which this author describes images that she's talking about in text. I think that that is quite a specific skill, and she seems to have it. So this is number 7/8. Okay, number 6 with no slashes is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, because this was just fun. I get that this is not a book for everyone. I kind of feel like, even though this won its category, I feel like on BookTube or BookTok at least, I'm like in the minority of having really liked this book. I just thought that this was super fun, and it did what I want a thriller of this kind to do, which is just, I had a good time with it. I liked the characters. I felt like it was an interesting commentary on the different ways that somebody who's been through this traumatic event might respond to it. I thought that that was smart. The humor in this worked for me. And it just, I can never put Grady Hendrix's books down. Like, I pick them up and I look up and I'm done. I really love his actual writing. I just have such a good time in this, and I just appreciated something that I had just such a rip-roaring good time in. And I should mention all the books we've talked about were 4.5 stars, and we we are about to enter 5-star territory. So top 5 are also 5 stars. Number 5 is The Fixer by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Now, the reason this is 5 stars is because this is definitely one of my favorite YA political thrillers I've ever read. This reminded me why I love this author so much. The way she writes books that are clearly intended for young adults. This is not written up in a way that I feel like a lot of YA tends to be, but it's still very enjoyable by an adult reader like myself. And I really love the way she does character development. I like the way she unfolds her plots. And this was just a great example of JLBing. Do you know what I mean? Like, this just feels like a very her book. I also happened to read this right around the same time I read While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. And they're actually very similar books in terms of the type of political thriller they are. And I actually think that this was a better done version, even though it was written for young adults. So anyway, this delivered the vibe I wanted from an author. It just delivered it perfectly. So hurrah for that. Number 4 is The Love Hypothesis from Ali Hazelwood. Now, when I first read this, I gave it 4.5 stars, but then I ended up rereading it 3 times, at least the back half of it. And so I felt like for that reason, it had to get bumped up to 5 stars. Felt like it needed to not be at the bottom of the 5-star pile. It like clawed its way into 5-star land. It felt like it deserved to be not at the very bottom, but this delivers on tropes that I love exactly the way that I like them. I think that this is a pretty universally loved book, though now that it has become so popular, it definitely has its detractors, which is fair enough, but I think it does what it is trying to do very, very well. Now, you may not like that. You may not like, I mean, this started its life as fan fiction, so it has a very fan fiction-y kind of quality to it, and I really liked that quality of it, but if you don't like that, you will not like this book. If you don't like the tropes it's playing with, you probably won't like this book. But I think it does what it is trying to do very, very well, and what it is trying to do are some of my favorite things to see done in a romance, so therefore I found this very, very satisfying. Number 3 is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, and this was my first time reading nonfiction from James Baldwin, and oh my gosh, what a treat. This book made me weep. It's a great example of very short nonfiction. It is a classic of nonfiction, so if you are looking to try classic nonfiction, but you don't want to make a huge commitment in terms of what you're signing up for, I think this is a great pick. I frankly put it here because of just how much emotion it elicited from me, particularly the first half of it, which is a letter to his nephew, and it just literally made me sit there and just boohoo. So I think any book that does that, especially considering that it's, you know, nonfiction and a classic, which sometimes I think classics have the reputation of being inaccessible or sort of remote, and I think that this is a great example of a classic nonfiction book that is far from that. It is so emotional, at least for me. And then number 2 is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, which I wanted to put up here towards the top because I think I'm just so mad. Well, I'm not mad that I waited this long to try Anne Bronte. I purposefully have been parceling out my Brontes slowly over time because there's a very limited supply of them. I think that this just really lived up to the hype of a new Bronte for me. So for that reason, it felt like it should be a number 2 because I feel like it's so easy when you have an author, or in this case, like a group of authors that you love so much, that sometimes you build it up and it doesn't deliver. This one surprised me. It didn't give me exactly what I thought it was going to give me, but it gave me more or something better than what I was expecting from it. I think it's super readable. If you are looking for an accessible classic, this is definitely on the list what I would tell you to start with. And then last, but definitionally not least, we have my unquestioned favorite book of the year, and then the other book in the series that was originally, I believe, at number 7 on the list, but I decided to just put it together with its sister up here at the top. The one that didn't make the top slot is Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. That was number 7. It's number 4 in the Percy Jackson series, and unquestionably number 1 for me this year was Percy Jackson and the Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. Now, again, I think that this has a few things working in its favor. I definitely think this was the book I needed at the time I read it, because I read this at the very beginning of the year when we were still fully in lockdown mode. I was still very, very sick and trying to get into remission for my autoimmune disease, so I was not feeling great personally. The world was in a mess, and Uncle Rick was just there for me in that moment. He gave me the middle grade wholesome vibes that I needed in that moment. He delivered that in spades, and this is such a perfect conclusion to that 5-book series. It is so satisfying from the plot perspective. We basically have, this is the 4th one is called The Battle of the Labyrinth. This could be called The Battle of Manhattan because basically almost this entire book is a battle montage. I think that piece is executed super well. On a micro plot level, the macro plot, the conclusion of where the story has been building is very satisfying. Great character work in this, particularly with Percy, Annabeth, and then Luke. I really love how Uncle Rick handled all of that. And then thematically, I just love what this book has to say about what it means to be a hero. It's exactly what like I would want to tell a young person who might be reading this. Like I really love the message of this. Particularly, I love the fact that it's called And the Last Olympian, and like what that says about the overall message that he's trying to give, I think is really beautiful and great. It's basically, I think, really problematizing the fact that we tend to think of heroes as being, you know, the splashy ones. I don't know, I just really love that. I loved everything about this. I intellectually love this book as a book for middle grade. I emotionally really connect with this. And then just personally in my life, this was the book I needed at the moment I needed it. So unquestionably my favorite book of the year by like a good margin. Like this, it was not hard this year to figure out what my favorite book of the year was. This started at the top and I never had any thoughts that it would not be the best book of the year. So yeah, for me, this was clearly the winner. I can't wait to finish up the Heroes of Olympus so that then I will understand the full 10-book arc of the overall story. So that was my best reads of 2021. I hope you guys have enjoyed this best of the year list of Palooza. I enjoy making these every year, so I hope you enjoy watching them. Definitely let me know what your favorite book of 2021 has been. I hope that it has had some clear winners like it did for me, for you. Let me know that in the comments below, or what you thought about any of the books we've talked about. And yeah, I think that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!